Hi everyone, good morning. Thanks for getting up early for me to travel from South Orange County to be here this morning. As Tim mentioned, Aston Martin was founded in 1913. Since then, we've produced the world's most beautiful vehicles. We're a bespoke manufacturer, building vehicles by hand with very low volume. To put that into perspective, 85,000 vehicles in our lifetime. To also put that in perspective, Toyota produces that many vehicles in about 3 days. For me, after nearly 20 years of working in the automotive industry, I was contacted by a good friend of mine named Simon Sproul, who's our chief marketing officer. I was living in England at the time, and he asked me if I wanted to take a tour of the Aston Martin factory. I mean, well, really, who wouldn't? So I accepted the invitation. I've been to a lot of automotive factories in my day, but this was unlike anyone I had ever seen. It's immaculate. You could literally eat off of the floor, but there was this very interesting sound that I couldn't quite pinpoint. In fact, it was a humming sound. I finally figured out what that sound was as we took our tour, and we walked past the seamstresses hand-stitching the leather. Only one seamstress can hand-stitch every Aston Martin because each car is handmade and each stitch is unique. So if you had one person stitching the left-hand side of the car and another person stitching the right-hand of the side of the car, they wouldn't match. So I was sort of amazed by this entire process. And then I was taken on a tour of understanding how the Wings badge was made, which is made in the jewelry district in Birmingham, England. Well, the resulting experience for me meant that driving an Aston Martin must be a moment to savor. So the real story about this factory tour that I took was it ended up being a job interview, which I was not expecting. So as we're taking the tour, we come across our new CEO named Andy Palmer. And he said, well, what did you think of the Aston Martin tour? And I said, I've been in a lot of automotive factories in my day, and I've never seen anything like this. And he said, do you think it's special? And I said, well, I think it's incredible. And he said, well, we'd like you to be part of Aston Martin. And I said, oh shit, this is a job interview? And he said, yes, we'd like you to be president of Aston Martin, the Americas. So I'm living in England, and I go home to see my husband, who's British at the time, and he asked me all about the factory tour. And I told him how the cars are made and how I marveled at the experience. And then he said to me, well, then what happened? And I said, well, they offered me a job. And he said, well, what is it? I said, well, it's president of Aston Martin for the Americas. Well, my husband looked at me and he said, well, that's the coolest blanking job in the world. I said, what should we do? He said, well, I guess we're going to move to California, which is what we've done. It's a privilege to represent what I believe to be the most beautiful automotive brand in the world. Unfortunately, however, our history hasn't been without its challenges. And you didn't think you would hear a quote from the movie Clueless at this time of the morning, but I will. Maybe the first 100 years, there were moments where Aston Martin felt like a full-on Monet. From far away, okay, but up close, a bit of a mess. We had multiple owners. We went bankrupt 7 times, and our product cadence was quite irregular. However, as I mentioned, in 2014, we brought on Andy Palmer as our CEO, and within 100 days, he stood at the auto show in Geneva and delivered a plan that we call the Second Century Plan. So it's all about propelling Aston Martin for our next 100 years, and to really take our past and learn from it, but look towards our future. So the beginning of the Second Century Plan was all about delivering 7 cars in 7 years. Now, many of you will be familiar with those 7 cars, but I'm going to rattle through it really quickly. So it started with the DB11 family, a V8, the V12 AMR, and a Volante. 1 year ago, we revealed the new Vantage, which just went on sale this summer. And happy to announce that the DBS Superleggera has just gone on sale, and you saw a picture of that before. That's 715 horsepower, 660 pound-foot of torque. After that, 2 weeks ago, we announced the name of our first SUV, which is the DBX. And certainly that vehicle will propel us into new territory. Next year, we will also launch the Rapide E, which will be our first all-electric vehicle. In addition to that, next comes a mid-engine sports car. And now another big one, which is sort of appropriate for why we're standing here today. We will relaunch Lagonda, which will be the world's first zero-emissions luxury brand. It absolutely looks straight to the future. And that's deliberate because the founder is a guy named Wilbur Gunn. And many of you might not know this, but Lagonda is actually named after a river in Ohio. You can check it out on Wikipedia. Since the beginning, Wilbur Gunn had this thought of how could we actually transform travel. And so as I think the pictures are rotating behind me, you will have seen the Lagonda vision concept, which certainly is about changing what travel looks like. The autonomous Lagonda won't have a hood because it's an all-electric power plant and it doesn't require one. And I really think that the design concept shows you how luxury and modern design can truly coexist. It'll enable passengers to go from point A to point B, but in a space that they've never quite imagined before. You know, one of my favorite parts about the story of Lagonda and where we are with designing that concept right now is if you come to our factory in Gaydon, many of you might be familiar with our chief creative officer, a guy named Merrick Reichman. And Merrick is about 6'4", and many times you can find Merrick sitting in the Lagonda design concept, brainstorming with his laptop on his lap, doing work, just as sort of a second office for himself. But even as we evolve since day one, Aston Martin's defining characteristic has been that we're bespoke. In an industry that is personified by slow-moving, slow-to-turn cruise ships, we, like our cars, are able to turn on a dime. And we believe that being bespoke allows us to be responsive and to be nimble, and obviously luxurious. Outsiders might view what we do in our individualized approach as old school, and maybe they think that it's bound for failure and a liability. However, looking at the current market and beyond, we believe the contrary. Our time-honored and bespoke approach is actually our greatest asset. And this doesn't just refer to our products and how our products are made. I mean, it takes about 300 hours, 200 to 300 hours to hand build every single Aston Martin. But we're also bespoke in our communications. Even our dealer experience is bespoke, and increasingly so, and that is thanks to the fact of how we actually utilize our data. Within the next 100 years, things will be different, and I warn you that my ability to predict the future is probably highly flawed. At the moment, I have a 2-year-old, so I'm quite focused on what it's going to look like when she turns about 16, 17, 18 years old and get her to college. And I've also heard that people have said that the rate of change today is actually at the slowest pace it will ever be. But what does this mean for our business, and what does this mean for Aston Martin? One thing that I am quite firm about in automotive is how customers will insist on interacting with auto manufacturers on their own terms. Aston Martin customers are differently positioned from most automotive buyers. Some of what I say here may actually run counter to the takeaways from the rest of the conference. Many automakers, including our own, are all heavily data-driven, and I'm sure today you are going to hear a lot about data. And we're all focused on seamless integration of that data to drive the customer experience and what our communications look like for our customers. But for the most part, manufacturers use that data for their own benefit. For example, we're communicating with customers now because it's the week of AutoMobility LA, and we're debuting our products now, regardless of whether that location or timing is convenient for our customers. For manufacturers, our lives revolve around when we want to launch our model year, when we want to reveal our car. But that doesn't actually have anything to do with that being on customers' terms and their own timing. At Aston Martin, we strive to speak to our customers in a meaningful way digitally, but they've told us they want a personal touch. So as we're busy gathering data, we like to use it in a way that truly benefits the customer. People still long for experiences, and they always will. I mean, that's what social media is, basically you sharing your experience with the world around you. But they also want to feel part of something. Whether it's in person or remotely, they need to fulfill that. So we want our communications to feel as special as the cars make you feel. So our communication can become even more tailored to the point where I'm sending a personal handwritten note if I know that that is what resonates with the customer. But we're using data to help lead how we communicate with them and to benefit our customers, not just necessarily for our benefit on our timing and on our terms. And I actually think that is one of the main things that will separate Aston Martin, as well as our products, of course. So let me share with you an example of how we choose to communicate with our customers. I've been in this role for 3 years, and I think it's quite important. You know, you get possibly accused of sitting in your ivory tower in Irvine, California, looking at your computer, not actually speaking to customers. I've chosen to take a different approach and spend as much time with them as I can, because they will tell us what they want. They will tell us what is important to them. And typically it has to do with how precious time is, but also that they want to be connected to other human beings. And I don't think that that will ever change. Automakers traditionally launch cars based on a formula. They will show it to the press first, then they will pick a date and have a party to introduce it to their customers, and then the car goes on sale. And that formula could be data-driven, but it's based on what works for the manufacturer. For the DB11, we decided to basically flip that for the launch. We used the data to deliver the cars to the customers first, when it suited them on their terms. So apologies to all my friends in the press that are here today. You did not see the car first. Our customers did. And we didn't ask them to come to one of our showrooms for a party. We asked them where they wanted to see the car. So maybe they wanted to see it in their home. And I think one of my favorite experiences we had during the DB11 launch was one of our customers, and probably a very well-known customer who's owned more Aston Martins than almost anyone I know. He said, well, I'd really like to see this car at my house. Okay, well, we're going to bring it to your house, invite your friends. What food would you like us to serve? Well, can you bring an In-N-Out burger truck and a keg of beer? It's like, well, yeah, of course we can. So the first person to actually see the DB11 saw it at their home with their friends, not a bunch of strangers eating the food they wanted and drinking the keg of beer that they wanted. This allows us to have some fun with how we display our cars, but how we let customers engage with our brand. And no one has to say, hey, don't forget about me. I'm sorry I wasn't available on that date. We want our customers' interactions with the brand to be just as special as every moment they have in the driver's seat or passenger seat or ultimately back seat. What we deliver is an experience that cannot be replicated, and no augmented reality can totally replace it. Or can it? The dealership helps to serve as an immersive experience and an environment for our customers. And when people come to our dealerships, we want to use the data to shift our focus to communicate what is most important to them. We want customers to test drive cars on their own terms, if that's what works for them. If a customer's vehicle needs service, clearly we are more than happy to pick up and drop off the car to make it convenient for them. On the flip side, we clearly have gearheads that want to be in the service department. So if we use the data, can you all still hear me? I'm sort of cutting in and out, but you got me. Okay, fine. But if they want to come and spend the day in our service department, let's let them know that there's a Zagato in for service that day. This is about how we use our data smartly to adapt to what's important to our customers, not only what's important for us. And that level of detail can actually be transformational for a customer's connection to a brand. All customers are not the same, they're not the same entity, and the role of data should help us segment and tailor what their experience looks like with Aston Martin. And I'll admit, some dealers are better at it than others, but my job and our job as a manufacturer is to bring all of our dealers up to that level where experiencing an Aston Martin is unlike anything else, and that experience can't just be the car alone. And of course, there's tons of opportunities for brands that we can capitalize on, putting things on customers' terms. So imagine if a car has a recall, and we know that these things happen, and every manufacturer is obligated to send to a customer a textbook letter. But the worst part about a recall is it's just simply inconvenient. So we have this notion of how do we give the customer their time back? So how do we start flipping what the experience looks like? So we have this thought of, we'll give you an hour of your day back, and how do we go about doing that? Every sales touch point and every moment of ownership should create a memorable experience. And I would say this, I think this area of the business is begging for a transformation. And I don't think that there's a brand that has quite figured out what it means from beginning to very end to offer options and alternatives along the way. Our job at Aston Martin is using data to deliver a tailored experience to each person that they will remember for a lifetime and that will deliver something that is truly rich for them. We also need to use technology to complement how we operate and how to bring our brand to life. That is what our customers are doing in every single facet of their life. So think about it this way. You know, after years, I had an iPhone 9, and I think about a year ago, I got an iPhone 10. And for all of you that have an iPhone 10, the first time you get it and you realize there's not a home button, you're like, okay, my memory reflex doesn't work. I keep tapping this thing and I can't get it to work. How long did it actually take you for your brain and your thumb to transform how you operate that phone? A half a day? Maybe 1 day? For me, it changed fairly instantly, and I haven't looked back. We used to type everything. Now everything is voice activated. If you come into my home, I have a smart home. My husband is a bit of a tech geek. So I found the whole thing incredibly frustrating for the first week or so because you can't actually touch any of the light switches. But now I don't even think about where the light switches are. And that is when, you know, my daughter is learning how to speak to Alexa to turn on the lights in our home. She doesn't even actually look to see where there might be a light switch in our house. So we actually have to find ways to pair technology with the tangible. We are best known for our performance and dynamics and how we handcraft every single element of our cars, down to our jewelry shop badges. I've spent many years studying this customer journey, and somehow, again, I don't think any of us as manufacturers have totally cracked the code. You still have to configure a car online and go through a very same process. That's actually how I started out my career in the automotive business at a little .com in the late 90s that built configuration technology and sold cars online. That was in 1999. The process of configuring a car hasn't actually changed that much. When you go to take a test drive, you're sitting next to potentially a stranger talking you through the vehicle. But in an age where customers expect technology at every single touch point, we owe it to them to explore some alternatives, such as digital options clearly throughout the journey. So our customers have a tendency to travel a lot. They're sort of hard to nail down. They're not in the same place at the same time. But when they want to take a test drive on the new DBS Superleggera, which I would recommend for every single human being in this room if you haven't had a chance to drive that car, why should you not be able to request that car to come to wherever you are, unlock it with a code, and through GPS coordinates, have the car talk you through the test drive experience. There's nothing that actually requires you to have someone talk you through it. It's actually quite simple. But this is about transforming things from being on our terms to them being on our customer terms. And I can promise you this, people that are in our segment of luxury expect that, because that is what their daily lives look like. We need to find a way to bring the dealership closer to the customer. So when people do head to dealerships in the future, how can we bring the uniqueness of Aston Martin to life for them? Today, you would arrive in a dealership, and chances are you would walk in the door, greeted warmly, utilizing data that they would know that it's you, and you'd walk in and see the most beautiful cars you'd ever seen in your life. And there they sit, parked on a showroom floor. So why can we not bring our story to life and that immersive nature of that factory tour that I described to you at the very beginning? Why does that not exist when you walk in the dealership? Because I would love for people, not everyone's going to make it to Gaydon, but I would love for everyone to be able to tell the story of the seamstress's sewing, or watching the 50 hours it takes to paint our car. Yes, it's about 50 hours. How do we allow them to know what it looks like to truly see the clay models taking shape? Of all the factories I've toured, most of them feel as though there's a wall between you and the vehicle build process. Robots are hard at work, and I've felt like a kid in a museum with a sense that I couldn't touch and I couldn't engage, and it was like watching a movie. In contrast, the Aston Martin factory feels more participatory, as though you're part of the theater, and one of the craftsmen might actually say to you, okay, come on over, I'm gonna show you how to do this yourself. We have people whose families have worked for generations in that factory. I think we should employ the technology to help our dealerships and the people who walk into our dealerships or outside of those dealerships to fall in love with the brand, because ours feels like a story that needs to be told. So we've talked about this notion of customers and what it means. In every meeting that we have internally or with our dealer network, we always start with our customers telling us what they want. When we let them do the talking, there's no way our dealers or we can deny it. But something we've also noticed is the spontaneity that exists in their lifestyles and the unpredictability. So for me, growing up, my dad was a doctor, and it was rather predictable. He'd go to work, he'd come home, dinner, all the rest of the stuff. We'd go on vacation in the summers. Recent decades, and especially I would say in the last 5 years, have shown that the ease of travel allows people to get from point A to point B much more regularly. And with the access to air travel, we find it very hard to pinpoint exactly where our customers are. They're very mobile, so every time I talk to one, I have to say, where are you? Their lives are multifaceted, and they're constantly traveling. So we hear it all the time. Do you want to come to our launch events? I'm sorry, I just decided this morning I'm going to hop on a plane to Mallorca. Okay, in the decades to come, I don't think our customers will just be going to Mallorca. They might be saying to me that they're going to Mars, which is kind of appropriate today. And we're working on ways, as Aston Martin, to facilitate that futuristic travel. Within the past year, Aston Martin has displayed options for transport, like the technology that you saw in Back to the Future 2, which a lot have already come to life. And a lot of that will seem commonplace. So you've seen behind me, as the pictures have rotated, the Volante Vision concept. That is a luxury personal aircraft to carry 3 adults. So imagine this, take yourself and 2 of your friends, hop in your mini aircraft, and enjoy the benefits of vertical takeoff and landing. Personal flight will give our customers a new dimension of freedom, well beyond the luxury of today's private air travel. Best of all, people will be able to appreciate what seems to be the most precious commodity, which is time. For a more stealth expression of wealth, focused on more exploration than actually utility, we teamed up with Triton Submarines to launch Project Neptune, which is a luxurious submersible for 2 passengers and a pilot. In 100 years, will Aston Martin be a car company? Well, we have a 105-year history as an automotive company, and I think it will take a long time for a business like ours that's been traditionally automotive to truly change. I mean, some of our customers' most fantastic emotions and pleasures have come experiencing an Aston Martin or being in an Aston Martin. And I think in the foreseeable future, that will remain the case. But I often wonder, will my 2-year-old have a driver's license? I would love for her to understand that magical feeling of an Aston Martin, because truly, there's nothing like it. Project Neptune, the Volante vision concept, are extensions of our more traditional automotive brand. I mean, think about it this way. In the space of 20 years, Amazon went from selling books to becoming one of the world's largest, if not the largest, online retailers. Google used to be viewed more like the white pages. You utilize it to look up people's phone numbers. Wonderful brands evolve, and we've already started to. But we won't consider automotive a bad word. We know that everything about Aston Martin, the look, the smell, the acceleration, handling, it makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. I mean, who would want to live a life without that? Few things in the world can deliver such a thrill, and we never want to lose sight of delivering that type of adventure and that type of emotion to our customers. But you may have sensed, and I'm sure as you're looking at that picture of the Lagonda vision concept, we're dreaming of taking Aston Martin in new directions, and we truly embrace the notion of being boundless. We're stretching ourselves to think far ahead, and we likely see today's designers dreaming of luxury vehicles on the road, underwater, and in the skies in decades to come. However, what's most important, at Aston Martin, we will always remain true to our roots as a true luxury manufacturer committed to a bespoke approach in the cars we make and in the experiences we deliver. So in spite of accepting this speaking engagement, where I'm supposed to address what the next 100 years are going to take us, which sounds like a really far time from now, I can actually talk about what will happen, and maybe in 100 years, or 10 years, or in 15 years, we'll all blink our eyes and we can be teleported wherever we want to go. But I do believe that the brands that are best equipped to handle the changes that will coming will be nimble in their ability to listen to customers' desires and to respond to them with bespoke, purpose-built vehicles delivered in a tailored communication style in a custom-built environment that's commensurate with the cars themselves. Our biggest strength in our history is that we're bespoke. Our nimbleness has defined us and will continue to do so as we move into our second century. Thank you very much.